invite you all to join me in a exploration of breath, pranayama, an ancient technique on regulating, controlling, and elongating your breath. Okay, so we're going to start that off with some very rhythmic breathing. And now, any one of my exercises, when I ask you to breathe, I'm asking you to breathe using your diaphragm, not the chest. So I don't want to see your chest expanding. I want to see your belly expanding and collapsing. All right? So in this first exercise, rhythmic breathing, breathing in for a count of 5 through the nose and exhaling for a count of 5 through the mouth. You're welcome to go ahead and keep your eyes closed. And for hand gestures, if you want to go ahead and do Vayu Mudra, that's just a safe, universal. It's just a very good technique. So what you're doing here essentially is you're firing up your wind, the air in your body. Okay, so the tips of the fingers, tips of the index finger represents the air, Vayu. And when you give fire, which comes in through the thumb, the tip of the thumb ignites, infuses energy into that whatever chakra of the body. So in this case, if it's fire, there is the sky element, earth, and water. And you can choose whichever one you want to ignite, but just for the sake of simplicity, if you don't have a lot of understanding and have thought about this, it's just a good idea to start with Vayu Mudra. So I lay my arms on my lap, palms facing up, eyes closed if you want, or just downshift your gaze. Beginning with a count of 5, inhale through the nostrils. Exhaling for a count of 5 through the mouth. Just inhaling nice and deep into the belly. And exhaling, letting go of what the body does not need. Just continue this nice, rhythmic, even breath in and out. Now, with this next inhale, we'll exhale with a longer exhalation, and that will be accompanied with the chant or the humming of the word Om. So together again, breathing in for a count of 5, and exhaling with an Om. Second round. Third round. Just even breathing again. Back to the 5 in, 5 out. For a few cycles of breath. And letting your awareness, your attention rest in the seat of consciousness in the third eye region. Because as you do these breathwork exercises, the beauty of it is the body knows how to breathe. Thank God it's an autonomic process where you don't have to consciously try to remember that you have to breathe, because if it depended on you remembering, you'd have died a long time ago, because you'd have gotten distracted with some text, phone call, or something else on TV, and you'd have forgotten to breathe. So we have to recognize that there's a gift in breathing being automatic, and so that frees up our mind to put our attention into whatever we want. So instead of it wandering here or there, I want you to please keep your attention focused on the seat of consciousness, just behind the eyes, just below the brain, between the ears. Nice and rhythmic. Okay, as we move on to this next exercise, this is what is referred to as Vastrika. Vastrika is you will open up your palms, stretch them up, facing outwards, and with the exhale, the focus needs to be on the exhale alone. Don't worry about the inhalation. You will bring your arms down, make a fist with it, like with a sharp exhalation. Okay, now the breath is completely happening through the nostrils. Notice my mouth is closed, and so the exhalation comes out as a sharp exhale using your diaphragm. Let the diaphragm push the air out, and it's coming out through the nostrils. So we're going to do a count of 7, take a break, 7, take a break, and 3 rounds like that. Okay? Together, go ahead and take a deep inhale. You can keep your eyes closed or shift your gaze downwards. Palms stretched facing out. Start. Take a break from this exercise, taking a regular inhale. Nice and deep. Exhale, and at the bottom of the lungs, when you're completely emptied your lungs, hold your breath. Hold till I tell you to do so. Five, 4, 3, 2, 1. Inhale. Well done. Congratulations on trusting yourself and ability to extend your ability to hold your breath. And if you couldn't hold your breath for that long, that's okay. Don't be too critical about yourself. We're doing the best that we can to increase this. By the way, this aspect of holding breath is an incredibly powerful way to deepen the amount of oxygenation of the blood. So it's maximizing the process of breathing in and the transference of the blood from the lungs into the bloodstream. So that's why we do this. Okay, so now we go on to the second round of Vastrika. So again, palms facing out, count of 7, we do it together, focus on the sharp exhale. Take a break from this exercise. Let the breathing continue regularly. Inhale. Exhale. Inhale, and this time at the top of your lungs, when the lungs are completely full, I want you to hold. Hold as best as you can, as long as I tell you to hold. Five, 4, 3, 2, 1. Exhale. And together, let's breathe. Inhale. 3/4 of a breath out. And let's begin our third and final round of Vastrika. Together. take a break from that exercise. Let's just regular breath in, out, and at the bottom of the lungs, completely empty lungs, I want you to hold as long as you can, or till I tell you to breathe in again. And this time while you're holding, squeeze the muscles in your buttocks. Just try to squeeze the muscles in your thighs, your hamstrings, your calves, the muscles in your abdomen. Try to squeeze your chest, your back, shoulder blades, your arms, your biceps, forearms, your face muscles, and holding all this while holding your breath. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Inhale. Exhale. Bring it back to the count of inhaling for a count of 5 through the nostrils, and exhaling for a count of 5 through the mouth. Okay, in this next exercise, we're going to use this concept called Brahmari. Brahmari is the buzzing bee. So watch while I do it. So don't quite do it till I tell you to do it. So just observe me, and then you can go ahead and follow this exercise, okay? So I'm going to use my thumb to seal my 2 eardrums, okay? And I'm going to use the 2 fingers, the middle and the ring finger, to close my eyes. I'm going to breathe in for a count of 5 and breathe out for a count of 10. And as I do breathing out, it's going to come out with my mouth closed, but with a hum sound like this. Watch what I do. Okay? This is a great exercise for massaging the internal organs inside your head, your sinus cavities, etc., etc. So let's do this together. 3 rounds. We're breathing in for a count of 5, exhaling for a count of 10 with a hum. And while you do that, I want you to take a break at the middle of each section, and then we'll just recalibrate, and then we'll do it again for 3 sets of that together. Starting with closing your eardrums, closing your eyes, breathing in for 5, and exhaling for 10 or even more if you like. Second round. Third and final round. Done, bring your palms down, arms rested. Keep your eyes closed if they had them closed. Just observe the feeling in your body. Starting with your head. This breath work is a great way to compensate for the times when we hold our breath, whether knowingly or unknowingly. Sometimes when we are too much caught up in the head, or we are startled by some news or what have you, when something distracts us like that, we tend to hold our breath. It's just one of the aspects of stress response. And when we do so, we're depriving the body of the much needed oxygen, the life force that keeps us, every cell in this body alive. So when you take time like this to consciously focus on breath and do these altered breathing techniques, what you're doing is you're making up for that time when you were holding your breath and depriving your body of the oxygen. Allowing the cycle of breath in and out naturally and harmoniously. The slower your breathing, the greater your lifespan. If you look at animals on this planet, the ones that have the longest breath, like the turtles, the elephants, they have the longest lifespan. So nice and easy breathing. And acknowledge for yourself, what is this last few minutes of breath work, how's it changed me? And if you'd like, go ahead and put that as a comment in the chat window so that we can all share and we can recognize from each other how each of us are feeling. Some way of us making community and just letting ourselves be heard. So for those of you who joined us just in the last few minutes, a warm welcome. You're here to listen to this topic on healing the racial divide using mindfulness practices. So we're here to talk about something that one of you community members, one of you asked me in the last session. My name is Jay Chodagam. For those of you who have never been to one of these sessions, I'm a meditation teacher here in the San Francisco Bay Area. I've been practicing for over 20 years. I've been teaching for about 15 years. And most recently, during the pandemic, it's this gift of opportunity for us to be sitting at home and undivided attention. We can be on these live video sessions. So we haven't missed a beat. We have done every single week since the pandemic began in March of 2020. So thank you for those of you who are sharing. You're feeling calm, my nerves. You're feeling relaxed. You're feeling peaceful and centered. You feel rejuvenated. And yes, thank you, Preeti, for making that comment about I have a circle here called Meditate with Jay on the Insight Timer app. And that's a great way for us, even though we meet only twice a week. Wednesday evenings at 6 p.m. Pacific, and then we also meet at 9 a.m. Pacific on Sunday mornings. But we have this lively conversation happening on this little circle there we call Meditate with Jay on the Insight Timer app, and that's a great place for you to ask questions, share about topics that you want me to address, etc., etc. There's also a freedom and forgiveness course that I've just launched. I know a lot of you know me and have heard about me through that course. And those of you who haven't, I highly, highly recommend you take that course. It's also on the Insight Timer app. It's a 10-part series, 10 minutes each day. It's, again, storytelling, wisdom nuggets, and meditation that helps you to realize how you have been holding on to grudges, resentment, hatred towards people, whether it's subtle or gross, for a long, long time. Some of these things are so deeply buried that you initially may not even realize that you're holding this. But I walk you with some exercises in which you will be able to discover some of those things that are latent deep within your psyche, and I help you to release them and let go and experience the true joy of freedom from that. So folks, today we're here to talk about healing the divide. And when I talk about healing the divide, it's not just about healing the divide in our country here in the United States, but it's also worldwide. We're seeing this growing aspect of fascism, fundamentalism, people, considering these are the part of the me tribe, those are the people who are, the opponents, then there's growing amount of this tension that we see, and we're seeing that the growth of these fascist politicians who take advantage of these divisions within us and within our society to basically rake up the fuel, rage the fires that are already inherent. And here we're going to talk about how to, first of all, recognize it, what happens when you don't, and then how are ways in which we can address some of these issues. Now, I want to preface this by saying that these divides that we see, this economic, racial disparity, gender-based inequality, are something that are deeply inherent, deeply installed institutions that have been going on for centuries. So while we will try to make headway, while we'll try to address certain ways in which we as individual contributors can contribute to this larger problem, by no way am I undermining the depth and the gravity of this issue. Okay? So when something has happened institutionally with the onslaught of Western culture and the Western machinery, first through religion, they use the name of God. If not the name of God, they use the name of the king or the queen. And if that didn't work, now they're using the financial power and the financial prowess. They're flexing their muscle through economic resources as a way to you convert or you be killed. Okay? And I say that in a metaphoric way, but that's been sort of the trend that we have seen through a long time in history. And so I want to address that. That's something that's deeply institutionalized, and something that, we need changes in policy. We need changes in these mechanisms by which we have some deeply installed structures that we need to reform. And again, all of that will happen when, first of all, we begin to bridge the divide within ourselves, inside our own psyche. So that's where the work begins, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So to begin with, as I always do, I want to share with you a story. This is a true story that was a conversation between one of the greatest Buddhist teachers in the West, Jack Kornfield, and by a Palestinian social worker at the San Francisco hospice by the name of Salam Khalili. So one day, Jack Kornfield meets Salam Khalili when he's doing his rounds at the hospice. And he's a little bit surprised to see that, he asks him, where are you from? And he says, I'm from Palestine. And it's like, okay, I've not seen too many people from Palestine on this hospice circuit. What got you into this work? And so Salam says that he got into this work because he had an experience that made him realize the importance of helping people deal with death and transitioning, and knowing that death is completely okay. And now Jack is a little bit surprised to hear these words coming out of his mouth. And he says, so what was that experience? What made you wake up to doing this kind of work? So Salam goes back to 1967, when he was a writer. He was a young man, and he was doing work to fight for the Palestine rights. He was living in Jerusalem, and then the Israeli army imprisoned him, put him into confinement. And when he was in the jail, he was continuing to write his articles and send out publications any which way that he possibly can. And then there was this one prison guard. For the most part, the Israeli prison guards were okay people. But there was this one prison guard, a Russian man, who was an engineer in Russia. But then when they had this formation of the Jewish state, he had moved here and he tried to establish his life, and he could not get himself a job as an engineer. And the only thing he could find was the night shift guard at the prison. And so obviously he was very disillusioned by it. He was very bitter. He was very angry. So one day when that guard was making his rounds, he asked Khalili a question. Khalili answered something. And somehow that response didn't sit very well with this Russian guard. He opened the jail cell, pulled Khalili out, kicked him on the floor, and kept beating him with his wand. And he started beating him and kicking him. And there came a point at which, when he was kicking him with a steel toe boot, Khalili lost his conscience. And he did not know exactly what happened, but what he was perceiving was that he had left this body. There was something about a separation between his consciousness and his physical identity, and he was floating up towards the ceiling. He was looking down at his body, going through that beating and the kicking. Not really understanding exactly what happened until later he had read the police report and the doctor's report who had examined what exactly happened, and apparently he was clinically declared dead at that point. But he says that in that moment, when he was separated from his body, he was floating up to the surface of this building. He had this sudden moment of something like the pop of his consciousness, of his identity, of the me. And there was this feeling of being in complete oneness with the flaking paint that's peeling off the wall, with that body that was getting beaten, and with the steel-toe boot that was kicking it, with that wand that was hitting it, with that sheep on the meadow that was bleating. There was a complete sense of joy, even though what had been happening a few moments ago was pretty brutal. And so Khalili says he woke up after a few days in a hospital ward, the prison hospital ward, very badly bruised, very badly hurting all over the body. But when he came back into his consciousness, he realized the futility of his work that he had been doing as this reporter for liberating the Palestine nation. He found that there was no more point in doing that work, and he had completely redesigned his life, and he ended up going and finding a Jewish Israeli woman and getting married to her and having Palestinian Jewish kids and raising them. Then they moved to San Francisco, to the Bay Area, and he started doing this work at the hospice, where he felt the need to sit down with people who were going through the transition. And through his personal experience, describing how dying is completely okay. It's only a question of transitioning. So folks, when I heard this story, it made me really ask myself this question: who am I? Who are we? And why is it that we've completely lost our connection with ourselves, let alone the rest of the world, rest of society? And we experience this growing amount of depression, anxiety, the trauma that comes from feeling alone. That many a times, unfortunately, it escalates into psycho disorders, leading to suicidal tendencies. So from this sense of separation, because you see, when we go through the education in our modern societies, in our modern systems, there's so much emphasis on the seen, right? If you cannot see it, if you cannot measure it, if you cannot weigh it, if you cannot touch it, that means it doesn't exist. So when I am living and growing up in the society which measures each other by how we look, how we behave, what we dress up like, which church or which mosque or which synagogue we go to pray at, and then we have this perception of the other. So the ancient Indian Vedic texts say, whenever there is the other, there is fear. There's no question about it. So if there is a sense of fear when you see a certain kind of people that look differently or pray differently or have a different sexual orientation or they have a different set of cultures than you, there is a natural bodily reflex. It's sort of deeply ingrained within our system to be afraid because we have deemed them to be the other. So then, what can we do? First of all, let's talk a little bit about what is it that I am seeing here in society here? I live in America. And I know a lot of you live in different parts of the world, but I want to use where I live as a petri dish to what's actually happening. So you might have all heard about the famous George Floyd case, infamous, or however you want to look at it, but it definitely put that issue on the map. It put it as the center of limelight in the news around the world, where the Black Lives movement, Black Lives Matter movement really became a thing, even in countries which I didn't expect, in Asia and the Middle East, etc., etc. So that was an issue that brought it into the limelight. But if you think about it, even today, the statistics of what is happening, even with, because, there's been reforms happening, there's been movements, there's been activism, there's been policy changes. We've had a black president, for God's sake, 8 years in office. And yet, we continue to see a absolute obvious discrimination towards people of color and minorities. And now, one thing that I observed recently, I don't know if you've heard this unfortunate news that happened. There was a killing in Atlanta of these 6 Asian, at an Asian massage parlor. Some of them were Asian, most of them were Asian, some of them were not. But what came out as in when I started doing research around, okay, so, we understand that, there is a, clear historical evidence of, blacks and whites in this country, but where do the Asians fit into this whole ecosystem of racial disparity and inequality? What was startling to me amongst all of the statistics that I saw was, first of all, the Asians are perceived to be a very successful culture. They're considered to be somebody who's hardworking and somebody who basically comes into these neighborhoods and they take on businesses, etc. And they're also considered to be meek. They're considered to be somebody who will not retaliate. And then to add on top of all of the stereotypes, one of the things that has been sort of falsely propagating through this country and through the, social media, what have you, is this idea that the virus that the pandemic which we are all facing today, somehow these neighbors of ours who are looking Asian, now they could be from any part of the world, they could be Singaporean, Korean, they could be Kazakhstan for all you know, and somehow these people deem somebody who has mongoloid looks to be part of the problem, which has brought this virus and has made our whole world really stop and reflect. And I actually have other thoughts about it, which I've shared with you. I actually think that this was Mother Nature's way of making us stop and really ask ourselves fundamental question: who are we, why are we here, and what's our greatest purpose? But anyway, coming back to this issue of the Asian hatred. So they have deemed this to be something that the Asian people are responsible for. And here's the interesting thing. While they've seen that a vast majority of the atrocity that is inflicted against people of black skin are white people, so 90% or more of the atrocities that we've seen against black people are white, 70% of atrocities that happen against Asian people are not necessarily white people. What does that mean? That means they're minorities inflicting harm and suffering on other minorities. So sit with that for a second. So what that statistic is telling you is that when we see somebody as something that we can get away with showing our frustration, our anger, mindless resentment towards, then we think we can hurt somebody else as long as we know that they cannot retaliate. As long as somehow we feel a sense of superiority, whether it's through economic or physical power or intellectual, what have you. So what that goes to show is that there is work that needs to be done by all of us, not just white people in this country, not just certain sections, not just certain classes. And I'm only talking about one aspect, which is about racial discrimination. But think about the other kinds of discrimination that we hold. People who have a different sexual orientation, people who are different color or different language or different culture, different religion. So, folks, I want to give you all a 5-step quiz which will help you to reflect for yourself the prejudice that you may be holding. And this is a quiz that I'm not going to ask you to share your answers. It's something that is completely a self-evaluation for yourself, where you don't need to declare your results. But it's something that I found very eye-opening as I started going through this evaluation. Okay? So go ahead, and if you want to take a pencil and a notebook or a piece of paper that you want to write down those results, you can do that for yourself. So the first question is, how open are you with connecting with different people outside of work? How often do you socialize with them with things like leisure activities, hobbies, visiting each other's homes, talking on the phone or on Zoom? Outside of work, and they do not come from your nationality, your race or ethnic background. So give yourself one of these answers. 1, never. 2, rarely. 3, sometimes. 4, often. And 5, very often. Okay, so moving on to the second question. How often do you socialize with people who have different political opinions than you? How often do you socialize with people who have different political opinions than you? Again, same set of answers. Never, rarely, sometimes, often, and very often. Question 3. How often do you socialize with people who have different education levels or economic levels, income levels than you? How often do you socialize with people who have different education levels or income levels than you? Never, rarely, sometimes, often, or very often. Question number 4. So ask yourself this question. I don't like to be in situations where people are in disagreement. Do I strongly agree with that? Do I somewhat agree with that? I neither agree nor disagree with that. I disagree. Or 5, I strongly disagree. Brings us to the last and 5th question. For me, it is best to ignore cultural differences. I believe it would be better if we were all just the same. Again, do I strongly agree? Do I agree? Do I neither disagree nor agree? I disagree and strongly disagree. So go ahead and look at your answers, and it'll give you an idea how much work there needs to be done for yourself in opening up your horizons, opening up your ability, opening up your heart to love people who have seemingly outward differences, either through race, either through political affiliation, through gender, through culture, through religion. How open are you to welcome them into your life? So, folks, now for the next few minutes, I'm going to talk about some of the ways, deeply vetted by science, through which we can start bridging this divide that we are finding growing around the world. Number 1, when you see somebody who looks different than you or behaves different than you, one of those things that you consider them to be the other, instead of trying to bucket them and categorize them into a certain group, see if you can focus on the individual. So it's very easy for us. You see, it's one of the human biases that when we see somebody with a mongoloid look, like I said, you could be from Kazakhstan, you could be from Singapore, you could be anybody from one of those countries, Philippines even. And then we quick to say that, oh, the person is Chinese, for example. That's a common kind of a judgment that people make. Instead, I ask you, can you actually look at the individual? What's their personality like? What's their preferences like? What are some of their favorite things? How do they behave? How does that particular individual interact with others in the community, whether it's your neighbor or in your workplace, what have you? So when you start looking at the person rather than making that prejudice, that judgment about the category that you need to box them into, the chances are you're building a bridge to both of you to walk and for you to meet somewhere along the way. Second, focus on shared identities. There's a very interesting experiment that was done, a research project that was done, that when people who are football fans, when they see another person fallen, when I see a person fall on the floor and the person fallen, he's fainted or he's hurt or he's tripped or what have you, and they see that that person who's fallen has a jersey that's from a different football team than theirs, they had the propensity to not help that person to get up. Just walk away. Complete apathy towards that person. And so these researchers did one other step. They said, okay, when they educated these people who were walking, the passersby, to think of it in a slightly different way and say, hey, but that person also likes football. Do you realize that versus so many other interests, hobbies? And just from that one tweak, the propensity of somebody who sees somebody wearing a football jersey that does not belong to their team, the chance of them helping them increased tremendously. So perhaps the lesson from that research experiment is for us to see commonality with those people that at the face of it look like the other. Think about it. We can find so many things. What are the things that bring us joy? What are the things that we like eating? What are the things that we like for perhaps entertainment? The communities that we live could be a reason. Communities that we work in could be a reason for us to bind around that point. Thereby taking away that fight or flight mechanism. There's a very ancient, deep-rooted tendency that the brain has evolved to see that, like I said, whenever you perceive somebody as the other, there is a fight or flight response that is being triggered. Because the other is considered to be somebody who's competing for the resources that you have. Take away something that you consider to be yours. A threat on your own security. So it takes effort for us to bypass that system and use the prefrontal cortex, the more advanced part of the brain, the executive centers of the brain, where this is where the spiritual centers of the brain, which makes us different from supposedly the more evolved creatures on the planet. It's when you start looking for ways in which you can actually beat that primitive part of your brain, which is creating that stress response. And looking at what are the things that I can find in common, and then thereby you'll start yourself relaxing in the presence of the same person or the people. Number 3. Listening to their stories. I used to run something called the San Francisco Men's Wisdom Circle, and I had this one doctor, a Jewish doctor by the name of Dr. Len Trobman. Incredible guy. He was a retired dentist in San Francisco. He had then gone to Israel and started doing these Israel-Palestine living room conversations. And when he came to the Men's Wisdom Circle, he made the statement, this is probably 15 years ago that he made this, but it still rings in my ear. And his statement was, the enemy is one whose story you have not heard yet. I repeat that. An enemy is one whose story you have not heard yet. So the moment you hear the stories of other people, their trials, their tribulations, their strives, and their successes, we will tend to find common ground because we are all in that same human experience, regardless of your culture, your color, your gender, your nationality, and your sexual orientation. We all seek the same fundamental values of peace, love, happiness, personal power, and wisdom, regardless of what might look on the outside. So when we begin to listen to the stories, find that common ground, and instead of judging the people based on some trying to fit them into some box in your head, try to focus on the individual and their personality, we can start healing this divide. And like I said, we have a lot of work to do. This is a lot of institutionalized discrimination. There's a lot of division that is deeply rooted into the policies of this in our country. And I don't know how many other countries I could speak for, but there are several countries, but I can't say for everybody that's attending the session today. But again, it begins with us beginning that divide, to heal that divide within our own psyche. Taking individual responsibility to start healing the differences. So folks, with that, I'd like to take us into a meditation to bring all of this into a personal practice. I'd like for you to either close your eyes or downshift your gaze, whatever you find comfortable. Taking in some nice, comfortable breaths into the belly. Breathing in through the nostrils and exhaling through the mouth. And as you're breathing in and out of your body, notice the fresh air that comes in as a cool stream going up the nostrils and down the windpipe, filling your lungs, all the way to the very bottom of your lungs. And as you exhale, you let go of what the body does not need, which comes out as a warm breath. As you continue observing this replenishing of energy, exchange of elements, I want you to pay attention particularly to that inflection point where the air, which goes up through the nostrils, turns around and goes down the windpipe. And this place right behind the bridge of the forehead, where the nose meets the forehead. Somewhere just below the brain and between the ears. This is the area where you, the conscient being, the observer, sits and observes through these eyes. You listen through these ears. You smell through this nose. You taste through this tongue. And you experience the sensation of touch through the vast surface of the skin. I, the observer, am separate from that which is being observed. I, the conscious one, is using this costume, this body, as my vehicle, as my medium of expression. And it's also my greatest tool for receiving the information from the world out there. My form is a point of divine light. My language is silence. My religion is love. And my home is a world far beyond the noise and the hustle of this physical world. So in just 1 second, I travel out of this body. I separate myself from the awareness of this physical limitation and see myself rising up into space, rising above the coolness of the moon, the warmth of the sun, the shimmering of the stars. Far beyond the physical dark space of matter, there's a realm of light. It's a realm of consciousness. It's the home of the soul. Where this vast expanse of golden red light, just like a beautiful sunset. Except there's nothing physical in this world of light. And in this realm of light, I'm sparkling there like a tiny diamond in this golden red sky. I'm completely at peace, enjoying the deep silence and the complete state of tranquility. And in this home of light, as I look around me, I see other shimmering stars, brilliant beings of light. Other tiny diamonds, my fellow actors, my brother and sister souls. Also suspended in this golden red sky. And in this place of silence, we're in complete harmony, like one big soul family, at peace and in oneness. We each go down onto this planet Earth, our stage for this drama, where we will adorn a different costume with our own identities and stories. And we'll begin to play our parts that we call life on Earth. But for a few moments, let me recognize the unity of the soul family. That at the core of our being, we are all these shimmering stars, all beings of love, and every one of us yearns for this peace that we find in our home as children of the Supreme One, the Supreme Parent, the Supreme Soul, our Mother, our Father, who we all are made in its light. And its glory. We're all happily suspended in this home of the souls, in complete tranquility. Let us bring our palms together in prayer position. And I want you to rub your palms against each other, igniting the chi, prana, life force. The palms are a great vortex for healing. And as you kindle this life force, I want you to cup both your eyes with your palms individually. can bless yourself. May this illusion of separation in my mind be removed. May my heart swell with love that I can share freely and unconditionally with others around me. And may equanimity and peace reign in my being so I can understand the depth and the commonality within the ones that I interface with. Now take our palms and face them outwards away from you, and let's send a blessing from the depth of our heart to those who are facing the brunt of this being marginalized, discriminated. Who are living in a state of fear. And we wish them complete peace in their hearts. We wish them lightness in their being. And joy in their minds. And to everyone and everything on this planet that I have been responsible for inflicting pain, suffering, or being marginalized, I seek their pardon. From the bottom of my heart, I apologize. And from the core of my being, I send light to all those who have been inflicted with pain or suffering because of the generations above me, because of my ancestry. May their deep wounds be healed with the light of the Supreme. And they may find justice. May they find their voice. May they find the support they need to live a happy, healthy, and fulfilling life. Amen. Om Shanti. Namaste. And I invite you at your own pace to gently come back into the circle. And I want you to share in one word how you feel right now. If you could please go ahead and put that into the chat window, I'd appreciate that. I'd appreciate hearing what this moment is like for you, wherever you are on this beautiful planet. I'm hearing serene, I'm feeling held, peaceful, calm, I'm feeling sleepy, I'm feeling grateful. And I also, while I see more comments coming in, I invite you to go ahead and ask any questions. I also thank you for your donations that you're making, because your donations help me to continue doing this work to both the privileged and the underprivileged in different parts of the world, whether it's online or on-site. I have a whole team of people that support me. There's a whole beautiful cast of characters that make all those audios, those videos, the web content, all of that available, and all of this costs money. So yes, energy in my palms, you feel the connection, V says, and there's a question Techa is asking, what is this style of meditation called? I love this way of practice. First of all, thank you, Techa, for recognizing and calling it out. So this has been my practice for 20 years, and I practiced in something called Raja Yoga meditation with the Brahma Kumaris. And this is a very ancient practice that goes back to 5,000 years. And if you've heard of this famous book of the East called the Bhagavad Gita, this is what the practice is about. Essentially, the practice of Raja Yoga stems around three fundamental questions. I'm simplifying it really, making it very, very easy for you to be able to understand. It's around these three questions about who am I, who do I belong to, and what is mine to do at this time in history, in this time of the cycle. Because, as you know, some of the ancient traditions like ours, like mine, we believe in the cyclical nature of time, that time is something that is constant. It's akin to a spinning wheel. So there is my dharma, but the dharma that is pertaining to this segment, this little sliver in time, that's called this lifetime. What's mine to do here? So yes, so that's my practice, and I went deep into this when I was in college. I found this. There's my TED Talk if you want to listen to that, the entire story of how I got into it and what I did when I got into it. It was a 20-year beautiful journey up until this point. Very, very powerful experiences, so much so that I hung up my coat, so to speak. I have 2 engineering degrees, but I don't practice either one of them. For me, the spiritual engineering, the science of what makes us tick, what makes us human, is the most fascinating thing. So I've spent the last decade or so really digging into the research of that, and then sharing some of those experiences with you, some of my findings with you through these medium, such as this online channel. So V is asking a question. Can you repeat the 3 things you said just a moment ago? There's a lot of 3 things that I shared. Which 3 things? Was it the 3 things that will heal us as a society, or the 3 things that are part of Raj Yoga? Part of yoga. Okay, so the 3 questions which form Raj Yoga, 3 fundamental questions. Who am I? Who do I belong to? And what is mine to do in this phase of my journey? When I say journey, as I mentioned, my journey is through time. I'm eternal, right? As a soul, I'm immortal, I'm imperishable, indestructible, unbreakable. I don't get burnt by fire, I don't get cut by a blade. So I have this eternal journey through time, represented by the Kal Chakra, the cycle of time. But what is mine to do at this phase of the journey? That's my dharma for me to understand. Raja Yoga, exactly. So be good. Stay positive, be loving, be kind, shine your light. And until I see you again, same time, same place next week, be well.